Hello and welcome to Cyber Resilience in the Cloud is Not Optional. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. Now, before we get to this great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio or video or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll be there to provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. First off, there's a link for getting started with Rubriks, so be sure to check that out. There's also a link to the Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide book club where you can get access to ATM's great printed resources on technology topics. There's also a link to the ATM Event Center, which has a calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar, we will be awarding one $300 Amazon gift card to a lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom. You'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. And to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card. This one is for $50, and it's for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Kim Lambert, who's a Principal Product Manager at Rubrik, and Joe Kelly, who's a cloud solutions architect with Rubrik and is going to walk us through some demos. So now I'm going to turn things over to Kim to take it away.
All right, thanks so much. Yes, my name is Kim Lambert. I am a product evangelist for cloud security at Rubrik, and I'm excited to speak with you all today. So at Rubrik, one of my focuses is on the area of our business that ensures availability for your data in the cloud as a critical component of cyber resiliency. And I'm joined today by Joe Kelly, a cloud solutions architect. He is a 20+ year veteran in the information technology space. Joe's an expert in automation, in cloud architectures, cloud design, and what's great is he brings to the table experience designing virtualization and storage solutions for customers, especially those with hybrid cloud environments, and implementing cybersecurity best practices. So I'm excited today that Joe will be giving you an in-depth demo of Rubrik Cloud Native Protection and Microsoft 365 Security, so you won't want to miss that. Now, I want you to walk away from this session with Joe and with me really understanding how to enable fast data recovery in the event of a cyber attack or even accidental data deletion. I want you to know why third-party protection for your Microsoft Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, why that is a must. And then also what an automated unified approach to having your data center, your edge, Microsoft Azure, Microsoft 365 security, what having that unified visibility can do for your cyber resilience. So to do that, I'm going to explain how the company I work for, Rubrik, has built this zero trust data security platform from the ground up to provide business continuity, cloud acceleration, resilience across IaaS, PaaS, and even your most critical suite of applications, so Microsoft 365. Because that's what we do at Rubrik. We protect your critical data and your applications from not only operational failures, disaster events, but the most grievous problem that businesses face today, ransomware. And we do that with our secure data backup and recovery solution. So upfront, I think it's important that you know Rubrik has partnered up with Microsoft for a combined zero trust approach to data security. So off the bat, you know that we're serious about helping customers secure their data in the public cloud. And Microsoft actually took an equity stake in Rubrik, and we announced that at the end of 2021. And we work very closely with them as a strategic partner. This partnership, it really works well because we have a joint vision as customer-focused organizations that we want to protect customers from cybersecurity threats to their data. Now, this partnership, it's great because it allows us at Rubrik to be in an incredibly favorable position in terms of innovation, technical support, the interlock there for our customers. John Thompson, former chairman of Microsoft, also sits on our board. So we're in lockstep starting at the top with access to senior executives at Microsoft. And Microsoft and Rubrik, they go hand in hand to be better together in the sense that we already manage hundreds of petabytes of data on Azure. We have over 2,500 joint customers, and we have that technology in place to not only secure your hybrid, your multi-cloud environment and give you visibility across the board, but also especially better secure your data in Azure and in Microsoft 365. So even though the shared responsibility model that everyone's been talking about for years and we all know exists, it still applies, Microsoft is now invested in taking a stance on recovery, and they're working with Rubrik as a trusted third-party vendor for backup, which Microsoft even recommends in their documentation as the absolute first step to ransomware recovery. Because whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or SaaS, that shared responsibility model for data protection, it still says the onus lies on you, the customer. And the complexity behind this comes into play, especially when you're operating in hybrid, you're operating multi-cloud, or at a really enormous scale too. And we all know as your presence in the cloud grows, it can become a more cloud, more problems type scenario. You've got the breadth of apps and services that you're running and you're using in the cloud, and it hits different people in your organization in different ways. So multi-cloud injects complexity and means somebody is left holding the bag for operationalizing backups across VMs, managed disks, or your databases in the cloud. You think about data infrastructure ops. They want to be able to successfully back up and quickly restore at the lowest cost and to consolidate and simplify infrastructure. You've got the cloud architects too, meanwhile, who aren't and don't want to be thinking about data governance as they try to focus on building fast in the cloud. Now you've got modern workplace owners who just want their apps up and running. They want their data available and they don't want to have any business interruption. But you've also got security ops who need to be able to ensure recoverability during an attack. So that's super important nowadays. And of course, you've got your CIO who wants to be able to prove attack readiness, which can be made really difficult with different reporting structures across the board. So you've got a lot going on here. And of course, everything's more complicated if you're still having multiple accounts to manage, right? And then within those regions, you're needing to protect the data. You have to set up all these different components around retention and frequency. Plus, when deploying resources within multiple regions for each account, you're also managing backup schemes across all these different regions. And oh, by the way, you very well may still have an on-premise environment too that needs the same sort of governance and security. So this all becomes a lot to manage. It's manual, it's resource intensive, it's just not scalable. And that's just data protection management. What about data security? What about being able to recover your data when you need it from uncompromised backups? We hear from a lot of customers we talk to that it can be really difficult to maintain visibility into dynamic data security and protection requirements across multiple environments, right? So recovery processes, they're fragmented. In a ransomware attack, we find that oftentimes if one cloud is hit, another cloud is hit. And problems may simultaneously be happening in your data center as well, right? So it's challenging then to get a baseline backup when you have AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, M365, other cloud enterprise apps. Fast recovery of all your data wherever it lives, that can be hard to ensure. And we talk to customers who use native tooling, and native tooling may work for your AWS environment, But are you maybe also utilizing Microsoft 365? Do you or other team members have plans to build in Azure? All of this is something that you need to take into consideration as your organization scales and your data protection needs grow. Because we just saw that multiple platforms to manage for hybrid and for multi-cloud, that can make management a challenge. It can make it tough to ensure that you have the right experienced technical resources for each cloud, that they are in place to effectively manage all those backup jobs to determine and improve recovery readiness. So, the customers we talk to, they struggle to maintain that holistic view. They have difficulty even generating the data recovery readiness proof that they need, whether it's reports to give to the CIO, or the board of directors. Now, luckily at Rubrik, we help customers solve for recovery at cloud scale, and we help them take charge of making sure that their data is protected. So we have one platform that can tie in regardless of where you are in your cloud journey. So whether you're in the early stages or you're born in the cloud and you're building all your apps in there and you want to know how you can apply security as well as governance. So our cloud approach made to address the challenges of customers we talk to that they face in the cloud has three tenets. So first, we drive automated business resiliency and security at the point of data. So secure backups by creating a data bunker in the cloud, meaning your backup is logically air-gapped. It's removed from identity boundaries that we know can be breached. Now, second, you can get started quickly. It's easy to scale as your business grows without breaking the bank. You can ensure that your cloud resources, they're protected as those architects build fast across a fragmented ecosystem. With this SaaS-based software, we're eliminating a lot of toil by consolidating the data management layer. We're drastically reducing the amount of operational impact it has on your team, especially if you have resources that have to spend valuable cycles doing Azure, AWS protection. And we've even got tiering features in place to optimize storage costs. And then third, we enable you to manage everything through a single UI. So all of this data across all your clouds and on-prem. And rather than managing these silos of management points and deploying all these different resources in the cloud, we consolidate it all. We bring it together to give you one point of view for everything. And that's able to help you define a baseline backup across all your resources, cloud and data center. And when you're deploying cloud protection, and even if you're coupling that with on-prem appliances or software delivered globally, you can then have a central management plane for visibility, and it can help you drive compliance and fast-track reporting across IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Now, these services we offer encompass three main functions. So first, Rubrik has the ability to archive to secure storage with the option of a Rubrik managed service built on Microsoft Azure, and we call that Rubrik Cloud Vault. And that provides an isolated offsite data archival. And you can also even utilize storage tiering for AWS and Azure for lower cost long-term cloud storage. And it's this capability we actually utilize in order to provide immutable backups for your Azure VMs and for your managed disks. Second, we also have the ability to launch existing applications in the cloud. And this can help you accelerate the move away from on-prem infrastructure with instantiation of your VMs and your applications. And then finally on the right, we help customers protect their cloud native applications across clouds. And we've got protection for EC2, RDS, Azure SQL. That's a big one nowadays as well. And this protection even includes ensuring recoverability for Microsoft 365 SaaS applications. So for so many businesses, we bring this up and we focus on it because we know that Microsoft 365 has become not only a tier 1 application and critical to your business operations, but also now a huge target for attackers. So it's something that you need to be aware of. Because while Microsoft offers data governance and availability tools, Rubrik is there for recovery from ransomware or accidental data deletion or long-term retention for everyday instances where maybe you need to recover 60, 90-day-old data that's been lost and you can't recover it maybe within Microsoft 365. So while Microsoft 365, the native tooling does have the functionality to help you control access, to keep attackers out. They've got compliance tools, they've got retention policies to help you schedule deletions so you don't keep data longer than you need to. In reality, retention hold can be misused in an account takeover to delete data, or data can be deleted by accident when the compliance policies maybe aren't well understood. And Microsoft also has classification and search tools like litigation hold to help you comply with compliance and e-discovery. But legal hold, it's not a substitute for backup. It can actually be really costly and time consuming. And that's why we make sure that there's an isolated copy of your data in Azure at Rubrik. It's physically separated from your Microsoft 365 data. So you can recover in bulk, you can do granular 3-step recovery to any destination, you can easily locate data with our real-time global search, and you can even auto-scale resources using Azure Kubernetes service to operate at scale. And this is all managed through our single SaaS application for your on-prem data, for hybrid and multi-cloud services. So that's kind of best of all, right? Now, in terms of your whole security strategy, where you may be thinking of everything for your organization, for enterprise, it's around adding multiple layers of protection, for converging that in a threat scenario. You're thinking about having perimeter security, you have your network security, your endpoint security, and your application security. But it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when these layers are going to be breached, no matter how much you've invested in them. For IaaS and PaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, think about the security of PaaS Azure SQL database, for example. So maybe you've moved traditional SQL Server database workloads over, but migrating to the cloud doesn't mean that there's enough data security in place. So for instance, Microsoft Backup Service has some limited backup functionality for Azure SQL, and it requires you to go inside each server to create policies inside of each. So if a new database actually comes up, you have to manually go in, you have to set up a policy for it. And in the meantime, if someone creates a new database there, that means there's a new hole in your data security, and that's creating risk. So it's just a lot to manage there. And when you think about the SaaS space too, security layers that are part of the traditional defense in depth strategy are managed by your SaaS-based platform vendors. So it's part of why you make the switch to SaaS, where the provider is taking ownership of those security layers. But this can make your life, this can obviously make your life easier from a security perspective and put security out of your purview. But keep in mind that those layers for enterprise security are different for SaaS. So for the SaaS-based world, those layers become identity and authentication layers. And the main entry point into the SaaS-based world, really for attackers, is your user credentials, your user logins. And that's where threat groups, they use those to gain access. Now, you also have the Microsoft native tools as well. So you're thinking about the native Microsoft 365 tool set there. And if those layers are breached as well, maybe admin credentials are compromised, that's where Rubrik really fits in as a critical part of this holistic defense in depth strategy. So with Rubrik, you have this logical, secure air gap between your core data and your backup data that is protected by Rubrik. So if attackers get through everything else, this is where it comes in. This is your last line of defense. So even when all those security defenses fail, you're still protected. And this is what we mean by security at the point of data. So by securing backup data against attack, Rubrik is protecting your applications. We're keeping your business running for everyone. So let's switch gears now. I've given you an overview of what we do with Rubrik, but let's see it in action. So get ready for a great intro to the Rubrik platform. And I'm going to have Joe here demo Rubrik Cloud Native Protection. And to do that, he'll be focusing in this demo specifically on protecting Microsoft Azure. Plus, he'll give a great look at Rubrik for Microsoft 365.
Yes, thanks. Hey everyone, my name's Joe Kelly. I'm a cloud solutions architect with Rubrik. Today we'll be looking at how we protect Azure VMs, managed volumes, M365 workloads, and Azure SQL. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're looking at here is our SaaS-based offering referred to as Polaris, and it does allow us to protect those workloads that we just discussed across all of your Rubrik estate. So no matter whether or not you're running bricks on premises and ingesting backup data in regards to that, or you're actually running what's referred to as cloud clusters within each of the cloud providers out there, or you're doing cloud native protection as well within Azure, we can manage those backup and protection operations across all of those different entities. So what we're looking here is really a roll-up or a culmination of tasks and events associated to those particular replication events, backup events, archive events, again, across all of those Rubrik entities. What we're going to do is jump into the inventory tab here at the top, and we'll start discussing some of the means we use to back up those particular workloads. So for here, you can see that we have a number of inventory cards, in particular to the Microsoft platform. How we get these entities into Polaris itself is very easy. We use OAuth to authenticate into your Azure account and M365 account. And initially, we do require a global admin to be able to basically allow for that communication into that account, but we don't utilize that global admin permissions therefore throughout. We do utilize a much limited set of permissions to be able to manage those workloads within those subscriptions, but we do require the ability to be able to create those service principals within the Azure AD tenant to basically allow for that representation of Polaris within your Azure account. So once that's added, those accounts are added, we would also, as part of that process, include any regions that you have resources in that you want to protect. And then Polaris will go out and discover those resources within those particular subscriptions. Once those resources are discovered, we'll actually go into these inventory cards and take a look at what's been discovered. So for instance, we'll go into Azure VMs and applications. And you can see here, these are particular VMs that have been discovered as part of that initial cloud account add. If we're getting a layout of the LAN here, what we're looking at here really from basically left to right is that we see over here we have different options for filtering. So we can go in here, we can select regions, we can select things that are specific to the Azure platform to be able to kind of prune this list over here, if you will. And then here at the top here, we have different entry points, or what we refer to as SLA domains. SLA domains are really a mapping or a declarative backup policy that defines frequency and retention for how we're going to back up these entities. But it also allows you to do things such as storage tiering or archiving down to cheaper blob-based storage, and even replication, across a source region to a destination region. And so those mappings of those SLA domains can happen at these different levels. So for instance, if you created an SLA domain, which we'll do here in just a second, you could say that anytime an Azure VM or managed disk comes up within a particular subscription, I want you to go ahead and apply a certain SLA domain to those entities. And so we would create that mapping between the SLA and the subscription itself. We can also go a little further down that hierarchy, and we could do it at the resource group level. And of course, we could certainly directly assign those SLAs at the virtual machine and managed disks. One point of interest, and where we see a lot of our customers heading and using, is these tag-based rules, which allow us to essentially have Polaris go out, look for a particular tag on a resource, and then automatically assign that SLA to that particular resource. And so it's very easy to create a tag rule. You just go in, choose what you want, what entity you want that tag or rule to be applied to. If we chose virtual machines, you give it a name. You choose the key value pair of that particular tag that already exists and has already been applied to your Azure resources. And then you would choose what subscriptions you want to apply that tag rule to. And then from that point on, Polaris will go and based on a certain allotted amount of time, we'll go out and discover those resources, determine where those particular tags exist, and then automatically map that SLA to those resources. So that's tag rules. So we're going to jump into the SLA domains, and we'll go through just a quick rundown of how we would create an SLA domain. So again, With the SLA domain, we're going to allow for our customers to basically define frequency and retention for how often and how long they want to retain those snapshots. And here we can select the different object types that you want to protect. So you'll notice that we have the option to do data center objects and cloud objects. So the important note here with the SLA domain is that we're allowing our customers to be able to select object types no matter where those objects exist. So you could certainly go in here and create an SLA that would define or protect objects that would exist not only in the data center but also within the cloud providers. So for instance, as it relates to cloud, I could go in here and select everything Microsoft based, right? And so we could choose M365, we could choose Azure VM and disk. Azure SQL databases and managed instances would need to be in their own SLA as of our first iteration of this protection. But these two options could exist together within the same SLA. If I hit next, then I would define it exactly as I mentioned before, how often we want to take those snapshots and how long we want to retain those snapshots. So we give it just a simple entry here. We'll take a snapshot every day. We'll retain those snapshots for 30 days. Here at the bottom, we do have options for snapshot windows, and since we are our first full incremental forever technology, we do allow you to schedule that first full if you see that's a benefit to your organization. We'll hit next. We do have the ability also to be able to archive down to cheaper blob-based storage. Now, keep in mind this is for those Azure VM and managed disk snapshots. This does not apply to M365 workloads. And so there is some prerequisite work that we have to do to get that archive location to show up in this particular workflow for the SLA domain. So we would have to go in and create a storage account and container associated with the subscription that we're going to be archiving to. And so we've already done that. That work has been pre-done, and then we have the option to be able to create or connect to that archive location. From here, we can set an archive threshold, so we can say how long we want those snapshots to exist within that archive, and then expire them after a set amount of time. And then we also have the ability to enable instant archive. So whenever the snapshot is committed, those managed disk snapshots are committed in the source account, we can go ahead and automatically tier those snapshots down to blob-based storage. Keep in mind with the archiving itself, it is a new capability we just added. We do have the ability to do immutable archives as it relates to that blob-based storage, so you can guarantee that once those archives or those snapshots hit that archive location, they are protected against modification. They are immutable. We'll hit next. Other options, so outside of archiving, we can also replicate across region. So we do have the option here to choose a region other than the source region. And same example applies, right? So once we replicate those snapshots to that destination region, we can then reset or change the replication retention as well. So we can say, all right, the replication is going to start immediately. That snapshot is going to be replicated, in this case, to Brazil South. And then we'll retain those snapshots for 9 days as part of this slider-based option here. And then the last screen would be just confirmation, right? So we would give it a name, we'd give it a description, that's optional, and then we'd hit create. So once that once that SLA domain has been created, we can jump back over to inventory. And then of course we can begin applying that SLA domain at these multiple different entry points for those SLA domains. You can see here that I do have an actual Azure VM down here that already has an SLA defined. So we'll go down here, select on that entry, and then we're now in the context of that Azure VM. A couple things to note here. So we do see some overview information as it relates to this particular Azure VM within that platform. You can see things such as the region, VM size, VNet, subnet, etc. And then we also see whether or not file indexing is enabled, what SLA domain has been applied to this particular VM. And then any managed disks that are associated with this. Some of the app consistency stuff, we do provide the capabilities from an Azure VM perspective to be able to create application consistent snapshots within the guest. We do require what's referred to as exo compute. This is a Rubrik term, but under the covers, the foundational pinnings of that particular service or feature is supported by AKS, so the Azure Kubernetes Service. So we will spin up this ephemeral compute to be able to perform those indexing operations, and then allow our customers to be able to search by file name across those snapshots themselves. So whatever type of entity this is, or whatever type of host this is, you can see I can type in Etsy, and then it'll go out and search for those results based on the indexing of those snapshots. If I clear out this screen, go back to the view here that we have of the calendar, I can jump into any one of these days and determine what snapshot I want to recover to. So let's choose the 29th. You can see here I have the option to recover. Before we go into that particular area, let's just take a look at what we're seeing here within this view. So I can see the snapshot has been scheduled, that has been driven by the SLA domain. And then I can also see that it's been indexed and archived. The indexing option is something that needs to be enabled on the VM itself, and we do have to enable exo compute. Remember that ephemeral compute that I just discussed? That needs to be enabled on a per region and per subscription basis today. We will allow for exo compute or centralized exo compute, so if you had a designated subscription that you wanted to create that exo compute cluster in and then share that across multiple subscriptions, we could certainly do that. Today it is defined on a per sub and per region perspective. And then also we can see here that the status has already been, this particular snapshot's already been archived, so that was defined within the SLA itself that's been applied to this particular Azure VM. If we jump into recover, I have the option to recover files, restore, and export. These two options are there by default. Recover files is enabled because we have enabled exo compute for where this Azure VM lives, and then we've also we've created that exo compute for that particular subscription. So let's go to recover files. Just to quickly go through this workflow, I would search for a file of interest that you want to recover from. I would choose that file or that folder, choose next. I choose the archive snapshot type. You could also choose other recovery sources if you were indeed replicating. In this particular case, for this SLA, I could choose from a replicated copy as well. And then let's go through, we'll hit next here, and then we'll choose where we want to download those particular files. So for here, it'd be an existing storage account or a new storage account. We could create that storage account for you for recovery of those files, or you could use an existing storage account. If we go back to our initial options, recovery options here, you see we also have the option to do a restore. A restore will allow you to essentially orchestrate the process of swapping the disk associated with that VM. So we'll maintain the shell of that VM, but we'll shut it down, we'll swap the disk based on the snapshot or restore point that you've chosen, and then we'll power up the VM. So we'll do all that orchestration for you. And then last but not least, we have the ability to do an export. An export is going to allow us to create a new virtual machine based on the point in time or snapshot that you have chosen. So we do have a few more launch parameters that we can set here as it relates to this recovery, such as the name, subscription. You can go cross subscription for this export. You can go cross resource group or change the resource group. You can go cross region. We can change the availability zone, etc., etc. here. So these are all different launch parameters that you're probably used to when you go through the process of creating an Azure VM. So those are your recovery options for Azure VM. Same options apply essentially for a managed disk. Let's jump into cloud again, PIN, and then we'll jump into the SQL databases and take a look just how that recovery would look as well. So you'll notice that it's the same look and feel as you move from service to service. And that's on purpose. That's to keep the consistency of this recovery workflow very similar, so it makes it very easy to go through the restore process and protect these particular resources. So let's take a look at this first option here. This demo SQL US East 1. We'll jump into the context of the actual database, and again at the top here you do have the different entry points for your SLA assignment, and we do have our filtering options over here on the left. Let's jump into the database itself, and you'll notice the consistency between Azure VMs and Azure SQL databases. We have the option, or have the view rather, of looking at the protection capabilities We also have the option of any object details that are associated with this particular Azure SQL database. And then here you can see that we can choose from a particular date to do any point in time recovery. So with our support, our Polaris support of these two database options PaaS offerings, we are going to allow you to protect and recover your managed instant databases and any databases associated with Azure SQL. So here I'll choose a date. I'll choose my point in time that I want to recover back to. So I'll just select that point in time. This is going to be up to 35 days that you'll be able to recover back to for these point in time options. And then I would choose recover based on the log backup type. You can see here the region, the database server, and resource group are all locked. And so we have the option to change the database name and elastic pool as part of this recovery. So let's jump back. One other point to mention here, we do allow for you to view any events associated with this particular context itself, the context of this database itself. We don't have anything in the last 2 hours, but it would show up here within this particular events tab. Last but not least, let's take a look at M365. So the dashboard for M365 is a little different here. You can tell here that we've got a number of very helpful options as it relates to protection and recovery of your M365 workloads or applications. We have, if we're kind of looking over here in the left corner, we see we have the option to actually viewing the service online for M365. We can see the status of that. So we're just tapping into a health-based API for the service itself. And the status of this service is going to directly influence these two cards over here. So if we're not able to meet the particular SLAs for the applications that we're protecting under M365, then you'll see the out of compliance for those SLAs go up. And of course, you'll also see daily errors and warnings go up as well, because that service is degraded, and we would see that based on the status of this particular service over here within this card itself. We can see at the bottom, we do support the following applications within the M365 service: Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. We'll take a look at Exchange and OneDrive as part of this demo, but realize that we do support SharePoint and Teams as well. If you want to assign an SLA domain, we can do so at the application level. So you can see here that each of these applications does have a particular SLA assigned to them. So very much like you would go in and you would add a subscription and a map of an SLA domain to a subscription, we can also map an SLA domain directly to a particular service itself. So these SLAs are all the same for each of these applications, but we could go in and assign various levels of SLAs across these applications. Let's cancel that, and then we'll jump into Exchange itself. And recovery, as you would imagine, just as a point of note, is that you can tell here that we are, again, very consistent in how we approach the UI and how we approach recovery process as it relates to M365 and everything that's under the context of Azure itself. And so again, we have the ability to be able to search by users here. So if I wanted to search for my name, I would type in the mailbox that I wanted to recover, the mailbox in its entirety, or different emails and folders within. I would select the username, and again, same look and feel. I would be able to look for this calendar view, choose the point in time that I want to recover from. So we'll choose the 23rd in this case as an example. We'll do recover. And then here I can choose the type of content that I want to recover from, whether that's mailbox or contacts. We'll choose mailbox. And then we'll choose what items we want to recover itself. So there is a bit of a discovery process as part of selecting on this particular screen itself. You see that it does bring up my mailbox in its entirety. I can click within that mailbox, and then I see a number of folders associated with that mailbox itself. We'll select inbox. We'll just choose a random email. We'll hit next. And then my options here are to restore to the original user or restore to another user. If we restore to another user, I would choose that particular user that I want to restore to. I choose next. It'll show me basically give me a confirmation of what email I've chosen or entity I've chosen to recover. And then it'll say that we're going to create this folder and restore that entity into that folder within this particular user's mailbox. And then we'd hit recover. So very easy process to get that going, get those entities restored into the originating email inbox, or excuse me, the originating mailbox, or to another mailbox. And then same process with OneDrive, right? We would choose the particular date and time we want to recover back to. We go into recover. We choose OneDrive in its entirety. This will go out, discover all the particular folder structures we have within OneDrive itself. Sometimes this discovery process takes a few seconds. We can see it finally populates. We jump into a particular folder for recovery. We choose a file, choose next, and then these are the options for recovery itself. So we can recover back to the original OneDrive of the original user, or we can recover to another user, or we can download from cloud, which allows us to export those options to a zip file. We'll hit next. It'll give us a confirmation, and then we can hit recover. So in summary, very easy process to integrate these different resources you have within your Azure accounts, giving you the ability to manage those protection and recovery operations for all of your Azure estate. And also report on those capabilities as well. So if you wanted to quickly review the compliancy of each of those entities, no matter where those resources exist, you could do so as part of the Polaris platform. That's all I had today. Thank you so much for the time, and happy hunting.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. All right, so to wrap up, we talked about securing your backups with a secure logical air gap. We talked about achieving a baseline backup across hybrid and multi-cloud, and then unifying your visibility in the process. And we believe we have one of the most elegant data security solutions out there from a cloud perspective. And Rubrik really has your back if you need to secure your environment holistically against data loss. We would love to help you achieve your security goals, and we have a lot of resources you can reference right from our website to check out, including technical white papers focused on each of the major public cloud providers. Okay, now this is the Q&A. First question. For Azure, are the snapshots immutable? Yeah, good question. Something we actually went GA with in April of 2022 is immutability for Azure VMs and managed disks. So to do that, we utilize storage tiering, and that takes data from your production subscription where there are VMs, and you can configure it to move the data to a storage subscription. And the air gapping benefits that I talked about for Rubrik are expanded here with this new functionality. So it's making sure your data is even more resilient. So for example, if you need a retention time period of 30 days, we put a time-based lock on that data for 14 days, then we put it on for another 14 days. And this is done automatically as a continuously extended worm lock. So as long as you take advantage of storage tiering, your data, yes, is then immutable by default for Azure VMs. Okay, another question. What are the big gotchas for security if you're in the middle of moving to the cloud? Great question. And I like that, gotchas, because I ask that myself a lot. We always want to know what the gotchas are. So you may have pure IaaS, you may have SaaS, PaaS environments, and maybe even legacy data sets too. And essentially, that means that there's data fragmentation. And our advice really that we tell our customers at Rubrik is, look for tooling, not just in the data protection space, but in general, that is feature rich, that's pluggable into all of the elements of your environment. If you're in the midst of this cloud transformation, right, and you're thinking about security. So especially your tier zeros and your tier ones, look for technology that is API driven. Look for technology that's extensible, that's mature, and that it's scalable to whatever boundary you think your organization may grow to over the lifetime of the investment. And based on what Rubrik's been doing, we could postulate that Rubrik as a company has made significant investments to make sure that we've got data management tooling that's capable, that's feature rich and platform native, regardless of where you're interacting. So that's a really good thing to think about when you are thinking about data management and data security platforms. All right, another question. How does Rubrik differentiate from AWS native tools for data security? Yeah, so we focused a lot on Azure for this session, but we are definitely a multi-cloud protection company. And your question is about AWS, and our differentiation versus AWS native tools is really less over the individual features, I'd say, and we're very glad to get into that with you and talk offline about your individual needs. It's definitely more about unification across on-prem, cloud, and multi-cloud, and giving you that visibility across what can be, like we said, this fragmented ecosystem. So with Rubrik, you're getting that ability to manage all your data regardless of where it lives now or in the future. So think about where your teams are building now, what cloud or clouds you're using, and you can quickly understand how difficult and complex it's going to be to manage all those different environments for one, but more importantly, how difficult it's going to be to prove that this critical data is protected from ransomware, that you do have a strategy in place to be able to recover all of it and recover all of it quickly, that it's not going to take weeks to recover from a backup, where in that time you're going to lose new data that's being created as well. Okay, let's see, and last question. Aren't the retention policies and Microsoft 365 the same thing? Okay. I think you're referring to the difference then between the native retention policies in Microsoft 365 and Rubrik-based protection, which is actually third-party backup. So the best way to think about it and to also explain to your colleagues in your organization, because there's a lot of confusion around this, is say there's a malicious threat actor who's able to compromise your admin credentials. Maybe they got in through phishing. They ultimately get access to your data. What they can do is they can change those retention schedules. And these threat actors, once they do that, they can delete versions of your data. So that's why it's critical to have an actual secure data backup solution that's protecting that data lifeline for you. Otherwise you'd have nothing to back that up. So if retention policies are manipulated, they're deleted, you have nothing to restore from. So, Microsoft 365 retention policies, they can also be just difficult to manage. They've got varying deletion schedules, so it becomes quite complex with the Microsoft native tooling. And you also need to make sure that new users are protected as soon as they come on board. Plus, when you're thinking about native tools like litigation hold, things like that just aren't meant for recovery at a large scale. They're meant for data governance and compliance. So if you have thousands of users, and many of our customers do, if your data is lost, you need an actual recovery solution to get back up and running fast.
Okay, I want to thank Kim for that great presentation and Joe for the demo walkthroughs. Those demos are always so helpful for understanding exactly what the tool does and understanding the power of the features. There were a few more questions that we didn't have time to get to here. I see questions from Kenneth and Stephen, Don, Mary Jane Rushi, and Dr. Robert, just to name a few. We'll be sure to pass those along to the Rubrik team so they can get you your answers after the event. Meanwhile, it's the moment a lot of you have been waiting for, the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $300 Amazon gift card today is Ed Carasquillo from Washington. Congratulations to Ed. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. And thanks, as always, to all of you for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time.